Good afternoon and welcome. My name's Nolene Duff and I'm the Chair of the Panel of Administrators this afternoon. I welcome you to the City of Casey Council meeting on the 18th of October 2022. I'd like to start with introductions and welcome the Panel of Administrators at the City of Casey, starting with Mr Miguel Belmar.
Good afternoon.
And Mr Cameron Boardman.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. And I'd also like to welcome our Chief Executive Officer, Mr Glenn Patterson, and other senior staff that are with us this afternoon, Mr James Collins, who's Director City Planning and Infrastructure, Colette McMahon, Director Community Life, Jen Bednar, Director Customer and Business Transformation, and Acting Director Holly de Kretzer. We're also joined by other staff, and I welcome them, most particularly Matthew and Jordan, our AV technicians, and Nicole Road, our Governance Support Officer this afternoon. I'd like to start with the Statement of Acknowledgement. The City of Casey proudly acknowledges the traditional owners, Casey's Aboriginal communities and their rich culture, and pays respect to their elders past, present and future. We acknowledge Aboriginal people as Australia's first peoples and as the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we work and live. The Diversity Statement. The City of Casey is home to remarkable diversity with many cultures, languages, faiths and communities of worship, ages, LGBTQI+ identities and landscapes, together forming our rich and dynamic community story. From our first Australians to our most recent arrivals and every wave between, the City of Casey welcomes and represents all community members and their respective ambitions to live healthy, rewarding and happy lives. We recognise this diversity as our strength and we aim to share, nurture and celebrate it. I now move to item 2, confirmation minutes. And there are 2 sets of meeting minutes to be adopted this afternoon. The first is for the special council meeting held on the 30th of August 2022. Is there a mover and a seconder to confirm the minutes of this meeting?
Yes, I'll move those.
Thank you, Mr Belmar.
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. All in favour? Carried. And the second meeting is the council meeting held on the 20th of September 2022. Is there a mover and a seconder to confirm the minutes?
Yes, I'll move those.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. And a seconder?
Seconded, Chair.
Mr Boardman. All in favour? Carried. Item 3, declaration of interests. I have considered my obligations under section 130 of the Local Government Act and have no conflict of interest relevant to the agenda papers this afternoon to declare. Do any of my panel members or officers present have a declaration of interest?
I have nothing to declare, Chair.
I have nothing to declare, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Nothing noted. Item 4 is public question time, and there are no public questions submitted through Council's website for this afternoon's Council meeting. Item 5, officer reports, and we have a number of reports to consider this afternoon. The first is item 5.1, the Council Annual Report for 2021-2022. And just prior to seeking a mover and seconder, I'd just like to make a couple of introductory comments with respect to our annual report for the City of Casey this afternoon. This is a statement of all of the work that's occurred throughout the city during the past year. And I think whilst there have been some ongoing challenges with respect to the COVID-19 pandemic, it's great to see our in-person services resume, our facilities reopen and events return to the city. And it's been a year of some very good public engagement and community participation nevertheless. In the City of Casey, there have been a number of notable highlights and achievements, and I'd like to formally thank our Chief Executive Officer, Mr Glenn Patterson, and his leadership team and all the Casey staff on their perseverance and hard work on what has been nevertheless a challenging year, a year where there's had to be a lot of adaptation and a lot of pivoting. So congratulations, Mr Patterson, to you and all your team in that regard. And I'm also very proud of the excellent work that's been accomplished in the past year in addressing governance issues in the city and continuing to work on increasing measures to rebuild public trust in council's decision-making and the work that the City of Casey undertakes. We've also been very strong in our advocacy efforts to federal and state governments, and we've had some significant commitments for key projects in the city, and we note this continues in the lead up to the Victorian state election as well. Through our community grants program, there's been over $1 million in funding to more than 250 community groups and organisations during the past year, and also work with local businesses and job seekers to boost employment and the local economy. And so we thank all of those local businesses who've participated, who've weathered the storm and have continued to trade and operate during what are very difficult times. I always say this, but I do encourage everybody to have a look at the annual report. It may appear very, very dry reading, but it is a real statement of the purpose and the achievements of the City of Casey during the past year. So I commend you to have a look at that report. There is a summary that will be on our website as well. And we're also producing a short video that provides the highlights for the year. So with that, I will seek a mover and a seconder for the annual report 2021-22. Do I have a mover?
Yes, I will move that, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Belmar, and a seconder.
Seconded, Chair.
Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for those introductory remarks. It's my pleasure this evening to move the adoption of the annual report, noting that it is in three parts. There's a report of operations, the financial statements and a performance statement, and noting also that we are required to prepare this document in accordance with the Local Government Act 2020, and tonight we are complying with our statutory obligations. I note also, as Chair, as you have mentioned, that the report will be available on Council website and also at Council libraries. An annual report's always a fantastic way of reflecting on the year that we've had and the achievements of Council during the past 12 months. And in particular, there are some parts of the report that I would like to just reflect on and address, noting in particular that the report is very easy to read, it contains a lot of information and contains highlights of what's occurred at Council. What I want to focus on are the parts of the report that address issues to do with governance, economy, and also with the way that we've addressed some environmental matters. So firstly, with respect to governance, I note that the report sets out the Council's continuing response to the Municipal Monitor's report. I note that we are continuing our work with respect to integrity and ethics, and also continuing our work with good governance. In particular, what I want to focus on in this reflection is the Community Leadership Program. I note that last year we had our first participants and graduates from the Community Leadership Program. That is a fantastic initiative that's been undertaken by Council, in which members of the community have undertaken a program in their own time after hours, where they've had the opportunity to learn not only about leadership but also about Council and the work of Council. It is a very diverse group of people who bring great skills from varied backgrounds, and it has been fantastic to see their work and to note also that that first group are now alumni who are continuing their engagement with Council, and it's a program that is continuing. And also, with respect to continuing to grow the Casey economy, the work that has been done by Council and officers with respect to expanding business development, noting in particular the types of programs that occurred during the last 12 months, such as Casey's Job Advocates, making a difference to local job seekers, and programs that have engaged with diverse communities to ensure that any preconceptions with respect to engaging with diverse employees are challenged and met. And I note that at the Business Awards earlier this year and also last year, I met with members of the community who have participated in that program. I note also that it has been a challenging year with respect to the continuing response to COVID, and that part of the response by council has been well, not so much an easing, but an acknowledgement that permissions and permits that are required for trading are matters that can be dealt with in a way that allows traders to not be constrained or delayed by the permit process. With respect to the environment, which is a matter that I wanted to address briefly, I note that in the last 12 months we set ourselves the task of planting 25,000 trees, and I note that we've not only achieved that but bettered that by planting in excess of 28,000 trees. And that is another way that council can continue its work in ensuring that we are providing a fantastic environment for the people of Casey. On a last matter, or two last matters that I wanted to address, Chair, and the first of those is the annual report considers and sets out in full detail the grants to community groups and organisations over the last 12 months, and I note that a total of over $1.2 million in grants have been provided to over 255 community groups. And if the community, members of the community read no other part of this report, I commend them to read this part of the report that sets out those community organisations, which in itself gives a fantastic summary of the types of different community groups that we have in Casey: cultural groups, dance groups, sporting clubs, arts clubs. It is a fantastic and always great to see all that these organisations exist in our community, that they are active and that they are engaging with council. And finally, I think it's always good to just be reminded of just how diverse Casey is. And again, at the annual statement, the annual report takes us through reminding us of our diversity and reminding us of the challenges that we face because of our diversity, and ensuring that Casey is always able to, or the City of Casey is always able to address those challenges. And with those comments, Chair, I'm happy to move the annual report. I want to thank the council staff who have worked on putting it together, and also thank all council staff for the work they've done over the last 12 months that is reflected in this report. I commend their work, and as I said, happy to move this report.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr Belmar. I am pleased to agree and endorse with everything you both said, and to equally compliment council staff on the preparation of not just a significantly impressive and comprehensive document that articulates quite clearly the performance of the organisation over the preceding 12 months, but does it in a way that, as Mr Belmar has just referenced, highlights the sensitivities from a cultural and community sense, but also a number of the challenges that we have not only experienced uniquely to this municipality over the last 12 months, but some of those challenges which we will unfortunately continue to experience, which are caused by other factors, which I will touch on shortly. But the 223 pages, and I know, Chair, that you do encourage members of the public to read this document, and it is an expansion upon our quarterly community reports, but equally we encourage members of the community to read and to reference. But what I can say contained within the report is that the significant performance reporting framework that we have undertaken as part of our governance reform, not just consistent with our obligations under the Act, but it does hopefully paint a picture of the genuineness and sincerity in which we have attempted and in most cases exceeded our performance targets, that we have come into this role with a degree of vigilance and diligence to ensure the decision making was transparent as best as possible, but consistent with the values of the organisations and acting in the community's best interests, which are clearly explained against each of the strategic objectives under the performance-related chapter. And to give an indication of that, and I do just briefly note that we will be talking about risk management and certainly the role of the Audit and Risk Committee momentarily, but creating a specific and clear risk appetite for the organisation to ensure that the executives, all of the managers and all of the staff in the organisation have got clear parameters, expectations and objectives clearly communicated from us, and that they can make decisions based upon the principles and the values in the organisation and the community's best interests, again shows and demonstrates a well-functioning organisation. And I think if we look at particularly from page 108 onwards of the governance and management checklist, of the vigilance that we as administrators have undertaken upon the recommendation and advice of the experts within the organisation to ensure that each aspect of policy and process and standards is clearly communicated, is clearly understood, is reviewed under a best practice framework, and then empowers the organisation to act with the utmost professionalism and competency. We are not just, I think, meeting the expectations of the community, but hopefully we are exceeding it purely because we are operating under that environment. But most importantly, Chair, we are communicating that as transparently as we can, and we do make that reference with a degree of repetition almost in this forum, that when these community-facing reports come to our attention, that we are trying as best as possible to provide the most detailed available information in the most comprehensive and transparent manner, so the community understands the process that we undertake, the level of detail and necessary information and evidence that we require to make these decisions, and that we own these decisions, communicate the results clearly to the community almost without exception. And I think that that is undoubtedly testament to a well-functioning, a highly productive organisation that is meeting its community remit, and that has each level of the organisation acting in concert to ensure that that performance maintain a paramount exemplar. So I echo what you've said about the Chief Executive Officer around, and also of the executive staff and the managers and everyone in the organisation. You don't want to be in the situation from a governance perspective to be offering undue platitudes, but in this situation where we have taken upon a number of challenges, not just articulated in the Monitor's report, but being consistent to the framework and the structured obligations that we have embedded in the organisation, it's clear to see that that is now reflected in the annual report, and that those targets and those community projects and all the other service delivery aspects that are clearly communicated are being met. So it is, from my perspective, Chair, an example of best practice performance reporting. I think all of us as part of this organisation should be very proud of the achievements that are clearly articulated in the report, notwithstanding that there are numerous challenges. We will continue to talk about that, we'll continue to be transparent about that, and we will continue to hopefully have a situation where we are addressing those challenges consistent with community expectations to get the best possible result for all stakeholders within the City of Casey. I'm pleased to second the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Now move to item 5.2, the Biannual Audit and Risk Committee update. And once I have a mover and a seconder, I will welcome the Chair of our Audit and Risk Committee, Mr John Nguyen, who will provide an update. But firstly, I'd like to seek a mover for the Biannual Audit and Risk Committee update.
Chair, yes, I will move the recommendation as put in anticipation of the Chair's report.
Thank you, Mr Boardman, and a seconder.
I will second that.
Thank you. And we'd like to now welcome the Chair of our Audit and Risk Committee, Mr John Nguyen, who's going to provide an update on behalf of the committee. So welcome, Mr Nguyen.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, administrators and Council executives. I'm pleased to talk to the biannual report, which is required under Section 54(5) of the Local Government Act 2020. My discussion over the next couple of minutes would talk about the work that the Audit and Risk Committee has undertaken over the last 6 months, and I'll outline some of the activities, findings, and other recommendations. So since we last delivered this report, the committee met on 3 occasions in May, August, and for 2 days on the 6th and 7th of September to talk about audit and risk issues. Suffice to say, in our May meeting, we talked about some of the general policies and procedures that comes up to the committee for ratifications or endorsement or discussions. And those policies are the standard policies that you would expect in any good governing council. Policies such as the fraud and corruption policy, statutory compliance policy, good governance policy, and also other policies that, as I noted, help to deliver good governance. In the August meeting, we focus predominantly on the activities of VARGO in reviewing the interim financial statements, and we spent quite a bit of time to look at and reflect on the draft financial statements. We then met on 2 occasions in September, on the 6th and 7th, to talk about the financial statements and also some of the other activities. And I think it's important to note that we met on 2 occasions in September simply because of the amount of work that was required to be discussed, but also very mindful that it was a period of time where we had a new CFO, and we also had VARGO in its first audit of the council's financial statements in a number of years. You note that in previous years, the work that VARGO undertake was outsourced to another provider, but this is the first year in a while where VARGO did the principal or the primary test work. I then want to talk about some of the other activities that the committee undertook during the year, which was to review the work of internal audit. We spent the May meeting talking about the draft internal audit schedule for the next couple of years, and in doing so, we wanted to make sure that issues that needed to be up for audit continue to be highlighted in the schedule. We also wanted to make sure that there is space within the audit schedule for ongoing or issues that are emerging that are not necessarily anticipated in any calendar year. And those issues can include a whole bunch of things, including the emerging cybersecurity risk or any other issues of risk that the audit committee would like internal audit to undertake. Some of the reports that the committee considered from internal audit was the work that they perform on credit cards, on quality assurance mapping, managing conflicts, and also IT controls, but also cyber security. It's probably a good point to note that over the last couple of years, the committee has been talking and reflecting on the emerging cybersecurity risk, and that's an area that we have asked internal audit to go back and do a bit more work so that they can provide us with confidence that IT and cybersecurity risk are being managed adequately from a council perspective. The other item that I wanted to mention was that in addition to internal audit reports, the committee also looked at some of the other reportings from other auditors that are required from time to time. And one such report is the Department of Transport Information protection audit. So that was considered in September. In all the reports that we've considered, certainly internal audit and other auditors have identified from time to time issues and findings that have been agreed to by management, and the committee continues to monitor the resolution of those findings. The last thing I wanted to note is to thank my fellow committee members, Carol Pagnon, Ernest Stabak, and also Cameron Boardman as the administrator's representative on the committee. So I might just pause there and see whether administrators have any questions.
Thank you, Mr Nguyen. Thank you for expanding on the information in the report and for the stewardship role that you're taking as chair of our Audit and Risk Committee. I might now move to Mr Boardman, who has moved the report, and ask him to speak to the report, and then to Mr Belmar as seconder. Mr Boardman.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Mr Nguyen. And I certainly don't have any questions for you, but I do have a compliment. And whilst you have acknowledged other committee members, including Carol and Ernest and myself, I think we on behalf of the other committee members, would like to acknowledge your leadership and the way that you have led the committee in as I've made this comment previously, in a period of transition itself, coming into a completely new committee where there was no historical members, and we had to set new operating rhythms, and we had to be consistent with what was still the remnants of an IBAC inquiry, and there was other challenges with other integrity agency inquiries which we had to deal with. But you've articulated the process and the professionalism that the committee has undertaken to ensure that we complement the operations of the organisation as best as we possibly can, under those two aspects of separating what is the enterprise risk framework and the audit requirements on reviewing the financial statements and the budgetary process, but doing it from a proactive and a respectful basis. And I think one of the points that you raised there, which is critical, is that when we have been recipients of information as required, acting upon it, it has not in any way been a tick-the-box exercise. It has been a proactive and clear process with the leadership of the organisation to identify process improvements, but to ensure that we, as a panel of administrators, are receiving the right level of advice from yourself and your co-committee members to ensure that all of those elements of what we would consider to be best practice enterprise risk framework are embedded into those decisions making, so that we are, and in fact, leading to better process outcomes at this end. And I think that that's been undoubtedly a welcome part of the improvement from your leadership and from all members of the committee, by comparison to certainly what may have existed in the past. I do want to just touch briefly, Chair, if I could, on some of the specific issues that we have almost taken a self-initiative basis, and that's around the InfoSec and data management processes that we have instigated with the organisation as a whole. This is a critical juncture of large organisations insofar as how that they are complying with not just changing legislative requirements on information security management, but also on data management and aspects around any issues regarding security instances and data breaches and reporting against that. And I can say with the utmost confidence that the level of expertise and knowledge firsthand on the committee in this particular subject has been not just a benefit to articulating and adding to the internal audit process, but ensuring, again, as I've referenced, that the organisation itself is getting a best practice framework to implement from its internal processes, and arguably leading to a much better and clear internal outcome. So I think we do need to look at the leadership provision that we can assist by ensuring that some of these emerging threats and challenges that the organisation has to deal with is being supported and in fact being initiated by the committee, and hopefully that is valued and acknowledged. Furthermore, you did touch on, Chair, that we did go through the first external audit with the Victorian Auditor General's Office in a challenging internal environment. We acknowledge that we were exiting a CFO, through an amicable exit, I must say, and onboarding a new CFO, literally in the middle of the external annual audit, and at the same time that VAGO themselves were experiencing challenges because of the backlog caused by the COVID lag and other resourcing issues. And I think, Chair, it is very clear that there has been a new relationship established with VAGO. There has certainly been respect at both ends. There has been an understanding of considerations and expectations at both ends, and that the way that VAGO engaged with us as a committee and identified areas of process improvement, which we have subsequently gone to management and sought clarification, and all have, without exception, have been acted upon, also shows the value of having the clear level of communication and trust between the external auditor, the committee, and also the internal auditor to ensure that we are having that internally focused, constant process improvement view ourselves. And I think that is, again, been a very healthy and a very productive and a prosperous outcome, and one that we are very fortunate to be somewhat relieved that we got through the process this year, but we have done so from a position of mutual respect and best interest in the organisation as a whole. So, Chair, I just want to compliment and acknowledge what you've said, and thank you for your leadership and your acceptance of the challenge, and also to Carol and to Ernest. And from my perspective, on behalf of the administrators, thank you for giving me the opportunity, and I trust that we are meeting the organisation's expectations and in the level of openness and clear communication, that where we have a role to play and where the management and the leadership of the organisation can require us to be assisting them to improve the operations of the organisation as a whole, we will certainly meet and exceed that challenge.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar?
Thank you, Chair. Just a few comments. In seconding this motion, I want to thank Mr Nguyen for his report this afternoon, and also Mr Boardman for his membership of the committee as a delegate of the panel. I note also the membership by Carol Begnan and Ernest Staybeck. This is, as it appears in the council papers, a very short report, but obviously and clearly a mountain of work lies behind it, and I want to acknowledge that work, and I want to acknowledge also the continuing conversation, the continuing work that is done as between the Audit and Risk Committee and council managers and VAGO to ensure that there is always process improvement. I note in particular a comment by Mr Nguyen that issues of findings that have been addressed by the Audit and Risk Committee have been agreed by management, is the note I have of his comment. To me, that confirms the ongoing discussion, the ongoing good work, and the respect that exists between this committee and management. And any good Audit and Risk Committee must maintain that trust with an organisation. Finally, I want to note as well that the Audit and Risk Committee has met on a number of occasions, including over 2 days, showing again the amount of work that is required by this committee. I note as well that the work occurred at a time when we were farewelling a CFO and welcoming a new CFO, all challenges in communication and in methods of work, but showing that the Audit and Risk Committee was able to meet those challenges, and that the processes of council were robust to be able to engage with that challenge. And so with those comments, and again with noting with thanks the work of the committee, I am happy to second this motion.
Thank you. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. And once again, Mr Nguyen, thank you for joining us this afternoon and providing that comprehensive report. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Chair.
We now move on to item 5.3, council meeting dates 2023 and change of December 2022 council meeting date. Do I have a mover?
Yes, I'll move that.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. And a seconder?
Yes, I'll second, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. I'm going to listen with interest to your moving speech, Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. It's my pleasure this evening to give notice of the council meeting dates for 2023. Note that we are maintaining the schedule that we have had during this year, which is to meet on the third Tuesday of each month, and to give notice to the community when these meetings will occur next year, and to invite them, as we always do, to participate, to attend, to watch online. I note as well that we are resolving to change the date of the December meeting from the 20th of December 2022 to the 13th of December 2022, and that is for good reason, given that it is very late to be holding a meeting on the 20th of December in any year, but in particular, given the way that the calendar falls this year, we believe this year. So we're giving notice of an earlier meeting. Finally, I want to note that with respect to community engagement, the report sets out the number of live stream views that we've had over the last 3 calendar years. I note that there has been a reduction in that, which is unfortunate. This panel wants to engage with the community. One of the ways we do that is through these meetings, and I want to ensure and invite the community to that these meetings are live streamed and invite them to participate, and also note that we invite questions and invite participation from the community. And with those comments, I'm happy to move this motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman, anything to add?
Chair, there is nothing possible I can add. That was as comprehensive in the circumstances as we could expect. So I'm pleased to second the recommendation.
Thank you. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.4 is variation to contract number CT000646 Grasses Road Construction Works, intersection upgrade at Grasses Road and Clyde Road, duplication of Grasses Road Bridge construction and associated works. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
Chair, I'll move the recommendation as put.
Thank you, Mr Boardman, and a seconder.
Yes, I'll second that.
Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman, I invite you to speak to your motion.
Chair, I speak briefly in regards to this recommendation, in no way understating the monetary value which is presented in the public report of the variation. By doing so, suggesting this may be one of a number of contract variations that may come to our attention in the future, in addition to those that already have. We are seeing significant variation insofar as contractors' expectations for these type of public works, which is in no way a reflection of management at this end. It is purely economic and environmental aspects, well publicised insofar as the availability of labour, availability and cost of materials, the lag that project phasing has been affected by as a consequence of COVID, and the general inflationary environment that we are faced with, which is in no way unique to Australia. These seem to be global issues, but they are at a quantum, particularly with the level of capital works that this organisation undertakes, which may cause some degree of alarm, but these are not unexpected. And I do want to give the community confidence that the unforeseen variations, as articulated in the report, for some degree of underground service relocations, there's been delays with AusNet's pole relocations, which again is an environmental factor, which is not in any way unique to the City of Casey. AusNet is having infrastructure challenges across the state and arguably across the country. In some areas there's been some land access issues, and there's been additional requirements as a consequence of overlays protections associated with the Victorian desal pipeline. What Council has done is to engage productively with the contractor to ensure that the valuations are market tested and assessed to be reasonable in the circumstances, and I'm confident that that is undoubtedly the case. I am also confident that the variation can be allocated under the 2022-23 Capital Works program, and this will allow for any adopted budget allocations within the foreseeable financial years to be phased accordingly, consistent with the expected works and the capital works variations as I've just articulated. But as I've said, these are matters which unfortunately will be somewhat commonplace, perhaps not necessarily this quantum, but certainly in other contracts there will be adjustments necessary by virtue of the challenges that are external to the organisation. But from a fiduciary and efficacy perspective, we will be making those decisions based upon the necessity for the works to be completed, the application of a fair market test process to ensure that there is value for money and adherence to the principles of adequate and specific financial management, and that such decisions can be funded from allocations or new allocations in a timely and responsible manner, and most importantly are in the community's best interests. And weighing up all of those factors, Chairs, I'm confident that that is what we have done in the circumstances, and for that reason I am pleased to move the recommendation in my name.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few short comments. As Mr Boardman has dealt extensively with a number of matters that we are continuing to see, I have considered the report and considered the confidential part of the report with respect to the amount. Noting the comments by Mr Boardman, I'm also aware of the fact that this is not the only request we're facing of this type, and also aware that it is an ongoing challenge for Council, but one in which officers are continuously keeping us up to date with them and ensuring that Council's always in the best place to meet these challenges. I note that the original contract was originally approved by Council in November 2020, which in many respects is almost a lifetime ago, given the challenges that the world has seen since that time. And it is unfortunate that this is required, but I note that it is for very good reasons. And with those comments, I'm happy to second the motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.5 is the CEO Employment and Remuneration Policy. Do I have a mover?
Yes, I'll move that.
Thank you, Mr Belmar, and a seconder.
Seconder, Chair.
Thank you. Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. This is in some respects a procedural motion with respect to our CEO Employment and Remuneration Policy, but it is also a key policy for Council because it governs and sets boundaries and framework for the relationship that we as administrators and future councillors will have in their relationship with the CEO. I've carefully considered it and note that the matters that are dealt with in the policy refer to new definitions, a purpose statement for the Employment and Remuneration Committee, terms of reference for the CEO Employment and Remuneration Committee, procedures for approval of CEO leave and arrangements for payment of CEO expenses. It might seem that this is at times policies like this are getting down to too fine a grain detail, but it is important to the good governance of the organisation to ensure that policies like this exist so that the relationship with their CEO and Council and councillors is always maintained on an even keel and all parties are aware of their responsibilities. With those comments, I'm happy to move this motion, noting that it will now be in place until 2026 unless earlier required to be updated, and noting that it is vital to ensure that policies such as this are in place to ensure good governance. And with those comments, I'm happy to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman.
Chair, I don't really have a whole lot to add apart from endorsing Mr Belmar's comments, particularly as it relates to the extensiveness of the process that we have undertaken to ensure that the policies and all aspects of the CEO's employments are not just fit for purpose, from ensuring that there is procedural fairness and equity in the contractual elements itself, but we have the right levels of conditions and transparency and clarity around our expectations of the CEO, which then flows through to the expectations of the organisation as a whole. We've spoken numerous times about the behaviour and the cultural aspects and the impact that we have as administrators, which flow down to the CEO when he is leading the organisation, and I'm very confident that by going through this process and having healthy two-way dialogue, extensive healthy two-way dialogue, as we are fully aware of, contributes to that culture and leads to the high-performing aspects of the organisation as a whole. There has been some minor changes to the policy, which has been a requirement under aspects both internal and internal. We have communicated those changes, but we do so that there is a rigorous performance reporting aspect that sits behind this, which equally is communicated publicly at an appropriate time, and that we are very fortunate to have a CEO that understands his obligations to the organisation and to us, and undoubtedly, Chair, operates under the principles of putting the community first and ensuring that every decision that we ultimately make is made with the community interests and those overarching principles that we've spoken about with significant detail. So pleased to move the recommendation as put, to complement the performance of the CEO and all staff as we had, and look forward to the organisation continuing to perform at a very high level.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Just a couple of other important things to note in this report. Quite importantly, the panel chose to engage an independent person to support us in the process of the CEO performance review process, and within the policy administering that under the terms of reference of the committee that we're adopting in compliance with the Local Government Act. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.6 is Section 11A Instrument of Authorisation, Planning and Environment Act. Do I have a mover?
Chair, I'll move this instrument and recommendation.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. And a seconder?
Yes, I'll second it.
Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman?
Chair, just yes, it is a very procedural matter that comes to our attention with a degree of regularity, which is not unexpected in an organisation this side, considering the number of staff that are exercising powers on behalf of the municipality under the Planning and Environment Act. There has been 4 staff members added under Class A, 5 have been removed under Class A, 7 added under Class B, 4 removed under Class B, and to comply with our statutory requirements, a full list of those responsible officers, including the red and green lines of those that have been removed and added respectfully, is clearly attached to this report. We'd like to thank all of those staff again who are involved in what is quite an extensive workload, considering we are a growth area council, but also acknowledge their professionalism and their commitment to process quality to ensure the decisions are made in accordance with the planning scheme and all the statutory requirements under the Act, but in a clear and as quick as possible process to meet the stakeholders' expectations, both those who are proponents of such applications and those that may not necessarily agree entirely, but working with the community to ensure that we can find common ground on those aspects, which thankfully are infrequent. But I do acknowledge this is a procedural matter, and pleased to move the recommendation as put.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar?
Thank you, Chair. I heartily endorse Mr Boardman's comments and have nothing further to add to this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. That's the conclusion of officer reports for our meeting today. Move to item 6, consideration of reports of committees, and I simply note the record of discussion as listed in the agenda papers. Item 7, petitions. No petitions received for the council meeting today. Item 8, urgent business. There's no urgent business for today's meeting. And item 9, closed council. There is one matter for consideration due to confidential reasons. So pursuant to Section 3 of the Local Government Act, the CEO has determined the reports listed and their attachments are confidential in accordance with Section 3 of the Act for the reasons specified, that being item 14.1, which is excluded from the public meeting due to Section 3(5)(f) of the Local Government Act 2020, that being that they are including include information that is personal information, being information which, if released, would result in an unreasonable disclosure of information about any person or their personal affairs. So with that, I thank those for their participation this afternoon, thank the officers for their reports and Mr Nguyen for his participation, and formally close the meeting. Good afternoon.